Today, assets mapping is an area which is still not well covered by many organizations. If you go to any organization, say, give me all the things, all the assets you're tracking to be mapped, to be protected, there's a good chance you will not even get 70% of the list. In some cases, even less. And as they say in security, what you can't protect, what you don't know. And this is that unknown. It has become more complex because the whole idea of where things reside has changed over time. There's IT assets, there are things on the cloud, there are things on premises, multiple data points from where you need to get assets.
When companies apply for insurance, cyber insurance specifically, part of the process requires you to have information security policies in place. How you manage data, do you have an IR, incident response policy, what will you do, and so on. And you have to make declarations too, like do you conduct employee awareness training, and so on and so forth. So if you don't have these policies in place, it's difficult for you to get insurance in the first place. And when let's say a breach happens during investigation, if the findings show that you are not doing what you claim you are doing, then obviously the chances of a payout becomes a lot lesser.
Cloud security, just being on public cloud doesn't secure. More and more breaches are happening because there are misconfigurations on the cloud. How do you handle a cloud well? And just that is very important. I've seen lots of breaches where people have inadvertently left your bucket open and data is leaked up from there.
Welcome to Cyber Sierra webinar series. Today we have Anagat Pareek on the call with us. Anagat, please do share your journey so far, especially the work that you have done in cyber. Over to you, Anagat.
Okay. Thanks, Pramodh. Very happy to be here on the call, and also happy to talk about my journey because this is something I'm very passionate about. Till very recently, I was with Paytm as the CISO for almost all their companies. I was looking at the main company. I was looking at security for the overseeing security of Paytm Money, looking at Paytm Mall and Paytm Games and the main Paytm company. And my journey in cybersecurity has been fantastic. I was seen security from ground up. I've seen things from very nascent stage to a very mature stage. And I've been fortunate enough to even see the scale and the problems that come with scale. I've seen how to deal with various startups. I've advised a few companies on how they need to build up their security posture. And with the cloud coming in, it's been even more exciting because with the cloud security posture management, looking at container security. So that's been even more exciting. But it's this area is more exciting than ever, and happy to talk about a few things on this call.
Thank you, Anagat. Paytm is, I would say, at scale, you're seeing what problems can result, right? As in many areas, cybersecurity being one of them. I would also want to ask, how did you get started in the field of cybersecurity? What got you interested in learning more about cybersecurity and eventually developing a full career where you rose up to become CISO at Paytm?
Thanks. Interestingly, I'm more from a technology and delivery background. And about 8-9 years ago, I got very interested in cybersecurity for a number of reasons. Obviously, there was a lot of threat around things. And I was, for a while, a CTO for Paytm Payments Bank when it was launched. I was the first CTO for the bank. And that time I got to work closely on implementation on certain security practices along with the CISO there. And that got me really interested in security, that I thought it was really wonderful and how security was being managed, especially in the bank. And when I started looking at it, I found security to be more logical, and I saw changes happening every day, and I thought, let me look at this more closely. And then I got into security, and then it's been just fun all along.
Thanks for sharing, Anagat. I also have to share that for myself, I got interested in cybersecurity when I dealt with the first data breach of my career. So, we were building a startup, and our goal was just go to market. I think all of us are prioritizing go to market all the time, right? That's where the competitive edge is. The faster we can go to market, the sooner feedback we can get, or the more users we can get. And around that time, one of us pushed out an API that wasn't authenticated, and someone could access someone else's data. That's when the start of the journey began, where we spent time with forensics, we work with legal, PR. It became a full-blown investigation. And long story short, I realized that a lot of us in the industry underestimate the importance of cybersecurity when we are building a company, whether it's at the early stage, definitely at the early stage, because we really prioritize go to market. And the significance of this becomes very, very big, as the company grows, right? At the size of Paytm, if we mess up cybersecurity, I think, it's very possible to say that a business might even stop, and you will lose a lot of money on an hourly basis. Is that accurate?
Yeah, absolutely right. And Pramodh, you brought in an interesting point on the startups. Even for the founders, for people who are doing startups, rather than their focus has been go to market, they need somebody even on a regular advisory basis, or somebody who works with them at least to show them the path of security. Because security for startups and founders is more like a hurdle in their growth, but it can be an enabler if done in the right strategy and with the right people, where you at least have a roadmap out. Somebody can tell you about the threats, and somebody who can work, have agility with the processes, and that's more important. And that's possible. And I think for the founders, it's very, very important to even look at it security from day one, actually.
Actually, I feel that as founders, what we do is we respond to the market. And here, when you mention security being important from day one, we have to bring in the big R word, which is regulation, right?
Yeah.
Where there is a regulatory constraint, whether it's coming from investors or whether it's coming from a bigger company, evaluating the supply chain risk, or whether it's coming from a first, second, or third party audit. When that pressure is put on us, that's when we take security seriously. Do you foresee a world where, in the absence of this pressure, company owners, business owners start to prioritize cybersecurity? Do you see that happening, or do you think it's still early days for us?
I think that's early days, and I've given that area a lot of thought. And the way I think is, if there's such a scenario where there's no regulation involved and you need security to be more focused, then I think the investors, the people who have put in the money, need to be more aware of the security aspects of the company, because they have skin in the game, and it's very important for them to understand security. So it's important for anybody's security company to evangelize with the investors on what it can happen, what security breaches can happen, what impact it has, and what ramifications it can have. So it's, like you said, it is early days. If it's not regulated, founders are not probably willing to look at it. But I think it's time that more networking with the investors, the VCs, the angels, and seed capital needs to be done for them to be aware that security is important, not only in words, but it can have large impact, negative impact.
I agree. Absolutely. In fact, I think I was reading this news. I have to find and share it with you, Anagat. In the US, there is a requirement. I'm not sure if it's already live, where at the board level, there's a requirement for somebody who understands cybersecurity to be present at the board level. There is a push from the top down. The government is taking it seriously. Companies are taking it seriously. And this is because the cybersecurity attacks have just shot through the roof during the pandemic. It is far more common, frequent now for cybersecurity attacks to happen. So it's definitely not as early days as back when it was maybe 2012. Things have progressed. It's becoming more and more serious. And one of the things that we discussed when we first met, Anagat, is of all the fancy things that we could be talking about, we spoke about asset mapping, which is the 101 of it, right? We have to know what assets we have that we need to protect. Why is, I would like, to ask you in this forum here, why is asset mapping important? Why is it not like a hygiene factor?
Absolutely, absolutely right. And we're talking about asset mapping, like you said, 101 of anything. Today, assets mapping is an area which is still not well covered by many, many organizations. If you go to any organization, say, give me all the things, all the assets you're tracking to be mapped, to be protected, there's a good chance you will not even get 70% of the list. In some cases, even less. And as they say in security, what you can't protect, what you don't know. And this is that unknown. It has become more complex because the whole idea of where things reside has changed over time. There's IT assets, there are things on the cloud, there are things on premises, multiple data points from where you need to get assets. And that's why it is even more difficult. So, in fact, a lot of shift has happened on asset mapping from IT side to the security side. It's security, there's a much larger impact if you don't know what assets you have compared to what assets. If you don't have assets and you're from IT, the impacts are larger. And a lot of breaches, like we were discussing earlier, have happened on things which people didn't even know about. More than that, what happens is people don't even know what operating systems or patches are running on each machine. There are different flavors. And I remember in my work with some companies and earlier, the advisory used to come on certain such level, on such an operating system. You need to be aware. Now, how do you find out if it's Apache or something? How do you find out which versions are running? So having not only the asset mapping, what you need to, but going one step below and seeing what's running there, that's even more critical. And like I said, there are multiple sources of truth. So there's cloud, there's on-prem. Somebody needs to combine. And it's so basic that a lot of time companies are not willing to put in the resources or the energy to get that thing together. It's people will put in money for the large so-called products, but this thing it's such a basic thing that it amazes me, and that we're still talking about in 2022.
So if we don't map our assets, it is fair to say that some of these will become attack vectors for the hackers. That's how systems get penetrated.
Absolutely. If you will not have the right solutions on it, you won't have EDR or anything on it. You won't be monitoring in your SIM. You won't be having logs, and that time it's just a blind side and a blind spot for you, and anything can happen there. And I think as a CISO, that was one thing that kept me awake at night. Is, do I really know all my assets? Because anything can hit you on the blind spot. If I know my assets, I'm covering them well, I'm pretty comfortable. But what kept me awake at night was, am I covering everything? The coverage. I can do full coverage on things I know, but I need to figure out what I don't know. And that is always a struggle. It's running on a treadmill kind of thing.
Yes, absolutely. I was just going to say, because the moment you have mapped out your assets, some team somewhere in the org is going to ship a new asset because everybody is developing, right? Somebody is either going to use an open source tool, somebody is going to use another application, or a team is developing something from scratch. So while it is basic, I find that maybe it's not easy to map all our assets thoroughly and accurately all the time. Is there any good way or tips that you have for doing a good job with asset mapping?
Okay. So one tip I have is that do not expect people to fill in forms of assets that they are shipping. Nobody will do that in an organization. So a couple of things that we did was, there are obviously a lot of CMDBs available online, but what we were able to do, we took an open source CMDB, and from there we mapped out assets from various sources. So if it was cloud, if it was AWS or Azure, from the cloud, we would get all the resources and all their IP addresses, everything into the database. From another side, we would have agents and get information from the on-prem. The idea is to collect information from various points of truth. There's no single point of truth today. At one time, maybe AD was a point of truth that no longer exists. There are multiple with Macs. A lot of Macs are not on AD, and all these servers are not on AD. So you need to get from various levels of truth. It could be Active Directory, could be your cloud, could be your on-prem or other 2-3 databases, and combining. So it's a good project that happens, and it's a mindset, and it's very important that constant work on asset mapping continues. It's not as glamorous as talking about advanced persistent threat or something like that, or code review, source code security review, but this is important, very, very, very important.
Got it. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
While important, I also remember from our past chat that you mentioned asset mapping being 101. You mentioned the most significant threat in your experience isn't just assets. It is something else. Can you share more about that?
Yeah. So I think the most important threat today is to do with the insider threats. And when we say insider threats, I don't mean that people have malicious intent or they want to, steal anything from the company. But because of your insider employees, the amount of breaches that happen is really significant. So far, in the world, we talk about perimeter security, defense in depth, coming from outside in. So you have multiple walls, like a moat, like a fort. But what happens if there's somebody inside the fort and they dig a tunnel through it? It's similar to that. And of all the insider threats, there was a study I was reading, about 63% happen due to people don't even know about it. This malicious intent would have 20-30%, disgruntled employees, stealing, cheating the company. But 60 to 70% of what happens is because people are unaware of that they are actually causing harm to the company by either clicking on a link, sharing information inadvertently, answering call, giving, it could be phishing, smishing, wishing, anything like that.
This naturally begs the question, how should we prepare for this?
I think one is the constant awareness training. Again, a very downplayed aspect. Today, from all my experience, I've seen that training, awareness, it becomes a lot like a tick mark, for audits. Have you done awareness training? Yes. But awareness training in the spirit of it. Do employees really understand? So the awareness training, and more than that, the drills that happen regularly, the phishing drills. It happens a lot of organization once a year, again, to meet some requirement. But more than that, are people really aware of what they're doing? And monitoring things like, in one of the places, I remember what we did was, as soon as somebody resigned or went on a notice period, we have noticed that people tend to ship out lots of files, documents, once they have put in a resignation. So we had, in that case, we tied up with the HR, somebody put in their notice on the HR system, we would get a notification, and immediately multiple things were being monitored, more importantly. And we started blocking a lot of things, which we would not block for regular employees. So keeping an eye, because the resigned employees are the ones even more likely to have malicious intent, not even for monetary benefits, but documents they want to keep and refer to there for a later job. So that is, I think, very, very important. The awareness exercise, the phishing exercise, and a lot of these ransomwares and are happening because of that. And I think we talked about, when we had spoken initially about last month, we talked about how, LinkedIn has now become a very major source of people being targeted. people, I listen to some podcasts on this. There's a very good podcast called Darknet Diaries, and it talks about the dark side of the internet, and it talks about how people are like something like a crypto company. They would target somebody from a crypto company, a DevOps, who is more likely to have a key, and then send them a job offer, an offer they can't refuse. And when they send the offer, that letter has, guess what, some malware and the key stolen, and they wiped off $400-500 million, which is irreversible. Financial institution, there's a chance of recovering, but in crypto, no. So I think these kind of stories need to be told. More than awareness, I think the stories have a larger impact on people. When I say awareness, don't click on this, don't click on that, it is just a sign of. But when I say this thing happened in this company, and we have many things to discuss, but there's so many things I can talk about, how various people, where people have given out information. People have been given job offers, and they say, okay, before you finalize, sign on dotted line, can you send us some documents of the work you have done? So the person will send the work, and then IPR of the company is out. So those kind of things, because there's only so much you can prevent from your DLP software or your tracking. Those are important, very important. But there's much, much more than that.
There's some things you mentioned there we should unpack. First of all, the tick mark experience. There's a mindset that let's do the bare minimum and be done with compliance requirements, right? For a company to take security seriously, there is a need to go beyond that mindset. Now, let's say we do go beyond that mindset. The employee awareness process is also very boring because we get an email. We know that it is an employee awareness training program. We want to get it done with 10 minutes of our time, and we move on. Very interesting, because it's been so many years, and still we are faced with campaigns where the experience for employee awareness has a lot of space for innovation, for good work to be done there. And guess who's doing all the good work? It is the people who are crafting these LinkedIn job ads, sending it to your email, and when you click on it, you get compromised. So you just uncovered something which we are also seeing in the market quite a fair bit, and that's what we spoke about in terms of the most common one that we are seeing is job offers from LinkedIn. Right? Absolutely. People need to be aware of that. And broadly, there's one final point before the next question, which is, yes, it's true that numbers really matter, but there's a saying that stories win hearts, right? Stories is what changes people to start waking up and taking action. So some of these stories do need to be told. How these stories are told really matters as well. It's not just about clicking here and there, but it's also about what happens, how money becomes irrecoverable, how damage becomes irreversible, and therefore what really clicking on a link means, right? When we understand that, I've also seen employees who are now on the other side of the spectrum, where they refuse to click any link at all, even from known people. Right. So I think there's some change going on for sure. And employee awareness, insider threats being the most significant threat in an org remains, and it's just so much of that, because the number of vectors keep on rising as we have more and more folks, as folks leave and so on, is something for us to keep in mind. Thanks for sharing about that, Anagat. Based on what you have seen, when some of these threats become real, they become an incident and eventually a breach, right? Is there any experience that you would like to share with us about breach or incidents, and also what you classify as a good incident response?
Okay, thanks for asking that, because this, I think, is this topic is very, very close to my heart, and it happened a lot because of the experience, but more because of reading and the experiences around the world. One area which is I could probably bet on it also, is one of the weakest in the whole chain of cybersecurity, right from asset mapping to your monitoring, everything, is incident response. Incident response is probably the major breach happens. The typical way it will happen is, there will be a bridge opened and about 50 people on the call, and everybody will be scrambling, and they won't know what to do. They'll be shouting at each other and trying to figure out and contain the problem. The there's no thought out process today from end to end. When I say incident response, people think incident response is okay, you have an incident, you analyze it and you respond to that. And there's a turnaround time like 24 hours for the informative and medium, there are 6 hours and things like that. There's much more beyond that. And so when I talk about incident response, let's say there is an incident. What does a company really do about it? If you ask people around it, and I've asked, you never get a clear answer. You can get a clear answer on many other things. And that is why, because people have not thought it through completely. First of all, one reason you don't think it through, because deep down inside, you don't assume that anything can go that bad. You prepare for it, but how bad can it go? There are companies today even working on doing a breach readiness. And I'll talk about what breach readiness is. That brings me to a very important point. Today, we talk about standards. We talk about NIST standards, the 5 pillars of NIST on risk management and how to manage security. But very rarely do you see people talking about standards in incident response. And there are 2 major standards, NIST and SANS. These standards talk about, I think the first thing they talk about is preparation. So how do you prepare for it? When you prepare for it, there are run books. When you have a DDoS attack or any other CSRF vulnerability found, depending on the vulnerability, there are different playbooks that they go along and right to the detail. Who do you contact? Which are the people, which are the engineering people you contact? Who are the legals? Who are the communication? And then there are different levels of the team. One is incident response team. Then there's the medium level team that does medium responses. And then there's a critical team. It's like a pyramid. Critical team looks at major breaches where you involve all the CXOs, you are the legal head and other aspects. So I think preparation is probably the most important. After that, obviously, you do an analysis of the problem. And then the main 3 things the standard talks about, the major step is, first of all, you need to contain the issue. Contain, then you eradicate the problem, and then recover from it. And the study has shown, and another study I was reading, that the companies which do this incident response well and contain well are likely to spend $2 million less on a breach compared to other companies, because they contain it well. And then at the end, you do a post recovery. The post facto analysis is equally important. I've seen breaches where incidents have happened and the same incident would happen after, say, 1 year, and the same kind of calls would happen. And when you talk about readiness, if there's a real breach, you have to figure out what do you call a breach? When do you inform your customers? When do you inform your stakeholders, like your board members or anybody else? In fact, to a level down of writing the tweet that will go out, saying that we are really sorry, this and such thing has happened, and we'll be up to that level. Because when there's fire, the temperatures are high, the emotions are very high, and getting down to basic text is the last thing people want to talk about. I think incident response, that's why I think it's important. And this is one area I really love to work more on.
Thanks for sharing. And in your experience so far, do you see many companies engaging in incident response, preparation, readiness, or do you think there's a lot of work for improvement for all of us?
I think there's for all of us. And I talk from my experience, from various work I've done. There's a lot of needed. For a couple of reasons. I think, you need to invest in this space also in terms of writing processes, being ready, doing breach drills. This may require some even investments to some level. And probably people are not probably willing to put in that investment because it's something that can happen. You'd rather put that investment in something for preventive. So that mindset of putting investment on that is not there. Even even the audits that I've faced, and we've gone through. Incident response has never been really part of it. And but you may have some view on it on if you're looking from an insurance point of view, because I said if you do contain well, your breach is likely to have much lesser impact than if you didn't have a strategy. Would that have an impact on the insurance?
Yes. So when companies apply for insurance, cyber insurance specifically, part of the process requires you to have information security policies in place. How you manage data, do you have an IR, incident response policy, what will you do, and so on. And you have to make declarations too, like do you conduct employee awareness training, and so on and so forth. So if you don't have these policies in place, it's difficult for you to get insurance in the first place. And when let's say a breach happens during investigation, if the findings show that you are not doing what you claim you are doing, then obviously the chances of a payout becomes a lot lesser, right?
I think I have tried such things, but unfortunately not successfully, because this is a harder problem to crack, but definitely a problem worth looking at. The way I see this needs to be done is if you have compliances, the GRC team that works with you, and I was looking at it, and I'd given a lot of work to my GRC team for that. So if I have my security team who are looking at cloud security, application, and my WAF and my SOC and everything else, they're so busy with day-to-day tasks that the last thing they want to talk about is anything like that. In fact, even SOC, for that matter, bring up incident response, the whole process. In my experience, I've seen some SOCs, it's half-hearted. So it has to be almost like a policy-driven, like your security information policy. And it has to be from that level down on IS policy, and there should be a strong focus on incident response. That needs to be done. And
thank you for sharing this. It's one of those policies that we see gaining traction in information security is that of zero trust. Recently it's been getting a lot more attention. It has been around for quite some time. Just wanted to seek your opinion, your thoughts on why this is the case.
Thanks. Zero trust, as you know, we've been talking about for a long time. In fact, I remember before pandemic, about even 2017, 18, one of the WAF companies, and they said, let's talk about zero trust. And I was wondering what zero trust really was and had no idea what it was. And as we have seen over the pandemic, that has gained more and more traction. And the reason that being that at one time, we were all working from office, and there was a definition of perimeter. So once you are in the network, you're doing things, and once you are in it, it was assumed that you're an employee which can be trusted. It can be a user, a device, or an application. They're trusted. But as we spread out more and more, pandemic has done a lot for zero trust in evangelizing in a way that people started talking about it. People are from various locations. And today, the definition of perimeter is very blurred. What is a perimeter? We don't know. We are working from home. We are working from everywhere. So that's when the zero trust actually became more and more important. And, the couple of principles that zero trust. So zero trust, there are solutions around it, but it's more thinking, more like a philosophy of the architecture, and there are companies providing it, but they're more of an architecture thinking. And there are two basic principles around it. And the first one is don't trust, always verify. For olden days, 2017, 18, when we were all working from office at one time, if you are on your LAN network and you access an application you're given right, you assume you're good. Now, what happens at that time, which we never understood that well, is if somebody penetrates the network and is onto the network, that person is automatically trusted. Today, that concept is going away, and we are saying if you are on the network, doesn't matter. You access in an application, you may be a user, you may be a device, you may be an application. We will make sure that we'll again re-verify who you are, and that's very, very important. The second comes to the very basics again of security. one of security 101s is giving least privilege access. Least privilege access to anybody who accesses. Earlier, people would connect remotely to mainly VPN, right? VPN, now zero trust architecture is replacing VPN in a lot of places because VPN has obviously its own vulnerabilities. And more importantly, on a VPN, you are on to the office or the corporate network, and then you are free to do whatever you want. You are in there doing everything that you want. And what people are doing is replacing VPN with one of the zero trust technologies. Is once you get access to a specific application, and also it makes sure that you get certain rights on that application, so that you are assigned to do nothing more, nothing less. And that's why the zero trust and ZTNA, the zero trust network architecture, has gained a lot of focus in the past. And I have also worked a fair amount on zero trust. In fact, one of the low-hanging use cases, obviously, to replace VPNs, because you can do VPN on unmanaged devices through the login password. You can get into a network, and then you can do anything you want internally. So replacing all that and making sure that any application that you access internally goes through some kind of like, generally the way it happens is there's a reverse proxy that happens, and then through that you really figure out where you want to go. Want to go to cloud applications or want to go to on-prem applications, and it goes to a particular application and not on a full network.
Is it easy for businesses who don't have zero trust policies to adopt them? Is it easy?
Yeah. So there are a lot of solutions out there today that can be done. There, and solutions varied, from very large corporates to the smaller ones, where you can actually look at multiple solutions. You can do 2 or 3 solutions put together, and you can put a zero trust methodology around it. But it's important that the leadership, the security leadership and rest of the leadership in the company understands the need for zero trust. You may not, once you have the philosophy, it's not necessary to implement on day one, but you can have a journey. You can have 6 to 8 months or 1 year to complete the journey. But the journey has to happen. Otherwise, you are, sitting on a very vulnerable thing, because that remote working is here to stay. It's not going away.
Thanks for sharing. I think we are now reaching the stage where I would love to ask you if there's any key message that you have for our audience, anyone who is building a business in the current times. What would you like us to tune into?
Okay. So I think if businesses are in various stages today. One is somebody currently building a business, really worried about the market, go-to-market strategy. Somebody is in medium stage, and obviously the large scale. For the founders or anybody who's starting up, my advice is work with somebody who has experience in security. Don't ignore it from day one, especially the cloud part, which we did not cover today. And obviously there's a lot to cover. So the main message is very important is, have somebody with you as a founder who can advise you on the security part. For medium and large enterprises, I think it's important that you have look at aspects which are less talked about. Look at employee awareness, look at assets that we talked about, look at incident response, because those are, the non-glamorous side of security, but they are equally important. The glam part everybody covers. You want to do vulnerability assessments and software, these things, SOC, SIM, all that stuff is well taken care of. But the non-glam part, as a leader, it's our responsibility to look from end to end, and where there are gaps that we need to fill, and not only do things which are tools driven. I see a lot of organizations and a lot of people who are tools driven. They have a checklist of 20 things. 20 things, these things done. But as a philosophy in spirit, are you doing things in spirit? For example, avoid awareness training. Be innovative about awareness training. Instead of it can be boring, make it interesting. Have stories. Incident response playbooks are boring. Be innovative around things. So be innovative in spirit. And somehow I believe that people who are not regulated have that benefit of being free and doing a lot more. Like initially we talked about, is it too early to talk about non-regulated people about security? I think they're at an advantage in certain way because they're free flowing. They can really do things around security which nobody can. They can be the flag bearers of innovation and thinking.
Thanks so much, Anagat. There's one line you mentioned which I think I would like to repeat for all of us to keep in mind. It goes very well with our nature in the startup industry, with businesses that are trying to stay at the front, at the cutting edge. You mentioned this: be innovative in spirit. That's a very powerful line that we should keep in mind. So with that, we have come to the end of our podcast, of our webinar series today. Thanks so much for your time, Anagat.
Thank you. Thanks, Pramodh. It's been a pleasure.